September 1931. Japan occupies Manchuria, northernmost province of China. Battered Chinese troops fall back towards Peking, where all-powerful emperors once ruled from the Forbidden City, home to priceless art treasures, heart and soul of the oldest civilization on Earth. All this could fall into the hands of the Japanese. As bombing raids threaten, Chinese officials reach a momentous decision. Evacuate the national treasures in the Palace Museum, supreme symbol of China's glorious past. The task is daunting. Pack 250,000 fragile, irreplaceable objects. February 1933, the first trainload of sealed wooden crates leaves Peking, joining rivers of refugees flowing south. Destination unknown.
The journey that began that night has ended here, in an underground fortress, a kind of Fort Knox of art, on the island of Taiwan. Millions of dollars worth of high-tech security protected. The riches under guard came here at an incredible cost. Why did so many people risk so much for an art collection? One Chinese poem says it best. Don't lose the past. If you lose the past, your will becomes a brittle thing, easily broken. Hold with the past, and all dishonor melts away. To look for China's past in Taiwan, you head for the National Palace Museum. What you find is a public building sitting on a green hillside. The displays inside are dazzling, but they hardly scratch the surface. Underneath, storehouses overflow with the hoarded art of the Forbidden City. So much that the museum can change exhibits every 6 months for 30 years and never show the same object twice. Taipei is the capital of the Republic of China on Taiwan. At first glance, it's a 20th century dream come true. A plugged-in, never-look-back kind of place. Taiwan Inc. to some. But many people here hold on to the tantalizing dream to go home again. The Chinese are obsessed with their past. They keep looking over their shoulder to see where they're going. History has shaped the self-image of the people on Taiwan. 40 years ago, the Chinese here lost a civil war on the mainland. They fled with their guns, their families, and their art. 5,000 years of it. But all Taiwan's material success hasn't brought them what they really want. Recognition by the world that they represent the true China. This is a nation in search of its identity. The Chinese on Taiwan cling fiercely to anything that celebrates their Chinese roots. For them, the National Palace Museum holds more than beautiful objects. What's on display here is pride, a nation's sense of self. Curiously, the collection grew out of one man's need to find himself. It was created some 200 years ago by an emperor of China. His name was Chienlung. He had unlimited power over the vast land of China and one small problem. He came from the wrong side of the Great Wall. He was a Manchurian from the north. Chienlung ascended to the throne in 1736 at the age of 25. While the King of England squabbled with his American colonies and the King of France ate cake, Chienlung reigned for 60 years. In his eyes, all European monarchs were minor princes. And why not? His dynasty, the Qing, known to the West as the Manchus, had a firm grip on what was clearly the largest and richest country in the world, the Celestial Empire. Chienlung's great-grandfather crossed the border from Manchuria to China with a troop of cavalry and seized control of Peking from the corrupt old Ming dynasty. His grandfather completed the conquest and pacified the country. From his father, Chienlung inherited an empire at peace and the family problem. The empire was Chinese, but the dynasty was Manchurian. Rough horsemen from the north. They ruled, but they didn't belong. Chienlung had power and wealth beyond measure, but it wasn't enough. He sought legitimacy, and he set out to buy it by vastly expanding the imperial art collection inherited from previous dynasties. By putting his stamp on China's past, Chienlung hoped to make himself more Chinese than the Chinese. Art and power have been linked in China for millennia. Some of the oldest pieces in the National Palace Museum collection are ritual bronzes, once used to offer sacrifices to ancestors in elaborate ceremonies. The ritual bronzes were also an emperor's entree to the throne room. In the words of an ancient oracle,
"When you have gained possession of the 9 bronze tripods, no one in the world will dare disobey you."
art is a mirror where we see ourselves as we'd like to be. Chienlung saw in the art he collected a way of living up to his name, which means enduring glory. The Chinese on Taiwan claim the treasures as their own, physical proof of their glorious lineage. For the rest of us, the National Palace Museum offers a rare glimpse into the strange and beautiful art of the Celestial Empire. Artists have always been looked up to as heroes in China. Chienlung set out to collect their works in the hope that some of their greatness would rub off on him. And when it came to greatness, no one could match a group of artists called the literati. The works they produced form the mainstay of Chienlung's collection. Who were these paragons of Chinese art? Bureaucrats, civil servants. It's as if a group of tax auditors went home at night and painted the Mona Lisa. To get their government jobs, they sat for a civil service exam in the literary classics. No culture ever placed a higher value on education. It didn't matter if your parents were rich or poor, nobility or peasants. A high grade changed your life forever. The highest achievers became role models for generations of ambitious youth. Like any other Chinese schoolboy, Chienlung's education started and ended with the teachings of Confucius. Honor the past, honor your parents, and do well in school. And who came closest to achieving this ideal? Those champion high achievers, the literati. The National Palace Museum is filled with their works. Chienlung not only collected the art they made, he longed to be one of them. Men like Shen Zhou, who read every book he could get his hands on, spent his spare time staring at clouds, and painted the finest landscapes of his day. In Imperial China, they called him Wen Ren, Chinese for Renaissance man. Mr. Wang Jingzhe is a modern-day Renaissance man. He's a philosopher, painter, calligrapher, poet, and screenwriter, with 7 million words in print. He also sings opera, but not the kind familiar to our ears. Some in the West might consider Mr. Wang a dilettante, but his students see him as a kind of Superman. He calls on 10 centuries of tradition for one purpose: to express himself.
A literati work is different from that of an ordinary person's. Why? Because the work has to express the man. It's not just a question of technique. Of course, literati painters have to master technique. But what's important is to go beyond technique, to reach for something higher, and to express your deepest feelings.
China's Renaissance men weren't shy about self-expression. They'd often get together to drink rice wine and egg each other on to higher and higher levels of creativity. The National Palace Museum is full of art objects that tell the story of one famous literary party, the gathering at Orchid Pavilion. Drunken guests who failed to complete a poem in time paid the penalty. They had to drink yet another cup of wine, launched downstream on lotus leaf rafts.
There was no music of string or pipes, but everyone took a drink and composed an ode, perfect for expressing the deepest emotions. This was a day of bright sky, clean air, and the life-giving winds were gentle yet invigorating. Looking up, one could sense the great canopy of heaven, and on earth the variety of creation. This was true bliss. All that was needed was here to delight the eye and the ear.
The Emperor Chienlung was infatuated with this vision of the good life, the camaraderie, the freedom, the idyllic settings. The Chinese garden was central to this vision, so within the walls of the Forbidden City, Chienlung built a garden, like this recreation on the grounds of the National Palace Museum. It was like a stage set. The star was the Emperor from Manchuria, the theme, How to Become Chinese. The supporting roles were played by nature. Here, Chienlung would be refreshed by a glimpse of pristine beauty. There, a rock was carefully posed to exalt the imagination. In his garden, the emperor could cast off his crown and pretend that his only concern was art. He might see himself as a humble traveler in some Chinese poem, or chatting with the legendary 7 sages of the bamboo grove. When he felt sufficiently artistic, Chienlung retreated to his private studio, which he modestly called the Hall of Delighting in Doing Good. Reaching for a brush, he'd turn out his daily poem or one of the paintings he produced month after month, year after year. Typical of his 43,000 poems are lines like these. Under the green shade of trees, I feel as happy as can be. And when the raindrops fall, then music fills me with poetic ecstasy. Chienlung was more prolific than profound, but surrounded by his artist's tools, themselves works of art, the emperor could at least imagine himself in touch with the spirit of China's most creative men. It wasn't easy for the Emperor Chienlung to like this kind of painting. He had to work at it. At first it looked so empty. No color, nothing pretty or flashy. Just bare images stripped to the core. Until you get to know these paintings better, they may all look alike. But get a little closer, and you see what Chienlung tried so hard to enjoy. A no-frills art. Almost like a pane of glass that lets you see through to the artist himself. These artists were tough-minded men, committed to high standards in their art, and uncompromising when anyone, even an emperor, failed to live up to their moral principles. Their unyielding spirit sometimes drove them to quit the court and all its trappings and take refuge in the countryside. Out of these acts of defiance came their finest paintings. The irony is, Chienlung came to love their work even though they rejected everything he stood for.
To most men, success means becoming rich and famous, whereas the true literary scholar seeks something else. It boils down to the word ya, which means elegance of thought. Superiority has nothing to do with fame, but with a strong sense of character. The literary man lives to study and write and express his ideas. His goal is a simple life, not one that is loud and ostentatious.
The Emperor Chienlung was a hands-on collector. He took great pleasure in going through his treasures, alone or with 1 or 2 companions. Just touching a traditional Chinese hand scroll is a sensuous delight. The tightly wound silk is meant to be unrolled slowly, and the contents savored, bit by bit. This hand scroll is one of the most popular pieces in the museum. It's called A City of Cathay. As it unrolls from right to left, the experience is like watching a film. The story is gradually revealed over time. The viewer even participates, constantly creating his own viewing frame as he goes along. "38 feet of moving pictures, a breathtaking tour of the river city of Kaifeng." Getting into the flow of it, you can almost hear the cries of the bird sellers. Smell the tempting aromas from the food stalls. Sense the bustle of crowded streets. Near the canopy of a fortune teller, a small boy relieves himself by the door of a school. It's like being a voyeur. You can look over walls, into courtyards, for glimpses of life even the locals were unaware of. When Chienlung really liked a painting like this, he wrote little comments of appreciation all over it. Other collectors did the same thing. This wasn't considered defacing a work of art, but a kind of dialogue between generations of art lovers. The Chinese don't see writing and painting as two separate things. Handwriting itself is considered the highest form of artistic expression in China. There are examples of calligraphy in the museum that are treated with the reverence we give to Rembrandts and Picassos. Calligraphy is the art of writing in Chinese. It takes practice, years of practice, at least 10 years. The Emperor Chienlung began the study of calligraphy at age 13. His own penmanship never reached the level of art, but it taught him a love of the brushstroke, which is the foundation of all the visual arts in China. The first writing in China was based on pictographs, little drawings of a person or an object. Even today, the written word has a direct visual impact for the Chinese.
The way we see the Western writing system is that it is no more than a system of representation. It does not have the expression of strength in each individual line. Nor is there any connection between the form and the meaning. Chinese calligraphy is a piece of art, while the Western handwriting system is a mere use of signs.
In the 8th century, a young man died in one of China's endless wars. His uncle wrote a tribute to his memory. This slip of paper is now in the National Palace Museum collection. It is prized because the written characters express grief not just in their meaning, but in their form. It is said that even the cross-outs can bring tears to the eyes of a Chinese reader.
Chinese calligraphy and painting come from the same starting point. The basic techniques are more or less the same, such as the correct way of holding the brush. But the rule is, before starting to paint, you must first learn to write correctly.
Western artists train by sketching the nude. The Chinese begin with the brushstroke. Dongyang started when she was 6. Her father made her write 20 characters a day over and over again. Today she's one of Taiwan's foremost calligraphers. Her brush is made of animal hair, tapering to a pliant point capable of infinite gradations of thickness and contour. The challenge is that each move of the brush is final. It can't be reworked as in Western oil painting. The calligrapher sets up a contrast between opposing qualities, forward and backward, thick and thin, connected and disconnected. The art lies in how she resolves these tensions into a balanced, harmonious whole. The character for the word one is a simple horizontal line. But in the hands of a master calligrapher, it comes alive with volume, depth, and texture. Many of China's greatest calligraphers deepened their art by observing the rhythmic movements of life, like the sway of a boatman on the Yangtze River. That pulse of life is what calligraphers try to get into their brushstroke. The Chinese have a word for it, qi, the life force, as in Tai Chi.
Qi
gives a piece of work life and vividness. Qi is like when a person breathes. One has to be very attentive that one's qi keeps flowing without interruption. For example, if the qi is broken halfway through, the piece of calligraphy will become lifeless, just as when a person stops breathing. When I use my wrist in writing small characters, my whole body is upright and my feet are level on the ground. And the force moves upward from my feet. Therefore, it is not just the wrist that is moving, but the entire body.
One of Chienlung's greatest heroes was a calligrapher. One of the works the emperor simply had to have is this precious piece of paper, now preserved in the National Palace Museum. It was written 1600 years ago by a calligrapher named Wang Shizhe. He said he was inspired by the flowing line and natural grace of a swan's neck. The style of calligraphy Wang Shizhe created has been described as floating ribbons twisting in a gentle breeze. The entire text consists of only 28 characters, the equivalent of 4 lines of English poetry. When it finally came into his possession, the Emperor Chienlung was so excited he composed 28 pages of appreciation in his own inimitable style. Under heaven, there is no equal to it. The paper is clean and pure and pleasant to the touch. I like this scroll so much I can't put it down. I was made so happy looking at it that I couldn't wait to write this. If anyone at court objected to 28 pages of this kind of commentary, they weren't about to tell Chienlung. Criticizing the emperor critic was not a healthy thing to do. So Chienlung spent many happy hours improving the masterpieces in his collection. The creative calligrapher works like a jazz musician. It takes long, hard practice to get ready, but at the moment of creation, the artist improvises.
First, you must imagine the thing to be done. Then grasp the brush and fix your attention so that you see clearly what you wish to paint. Start quickly, like a hawk swooping down at the first sight of the hare. Follow straight what you see before you. If you hesitate a moment, it will be gone.
The ultimate example of the calligrapher's art is this autobiographical essay by Huai Su. Huai Su was a monk who often spent his last pennies on wine instead of paper. He wrote on leaves, walls, his own or someone else's clothes, whatever was handy when inspiration struck. His utter lack of pretense is captured in his nickname, the Drunk Monk. Huai Su was a bold and free spirit in an uptight society. In his wild brushstrokes, he went beyond technique. What might look like a doodle to us is to the Chinese the height of spontaneous self-expression, the goal of every calligrapher.
Wonderfully lofty are these mountains. Inexhaustible is their mystery. To grasp them, one must love them utterly, study their essential spirit diligently. Then in painting them, the eye will not be aware of the silk, nor will the hand consciously wield the brush. Thus will the paintings become like the mountains themselves, now bright and distinct, now dark and boundless, always profoundly mysterious.
Chinese painting is a time machine. It takes you back into the past, which is where the Chinese look for inspiration. Every visitor to the National Palace Museum wants to see this landscape known as Early Spring by Guo-ji. This 1,000-year-old masterpiece has served as model for thousands of paintings since. Some of them masterpieces in their own right.
The first step in Chinese painting is to copy ancient masterpieces. If you were going to paint a tree, how are you going to know how to paint it? You can't do it without copying first. Chinese painting has a whole history behind it. Only after you've studied and mastered the techniques can you paint what's in your mind. You can't just go out and paint out of nowhere. That is not Chinese painting.
It's not just that Chinese painters paint the same way, it's that they see the world the same way. This way of seeing did not come naturally to Chienlung, but he knew what he was supposed to like, and he was determined to train his eye. Basic training for the Chinese painter begins with observing nature. The Chinese see nature as a classroom, where the same lesson is repeated again and again. Reconcile opposites. In turbulence, seek harmony. Within the many, find the one. To experience early spring as Chienlung was trained to do, let your eye roam across it. You'll find yourself drawn to certain details. As you take time to absorb them, you begin to feel the tension between opposing elements, dark against light, abundant and barren. Human figures have their place here, not dominating as in most Western painting, but seen in humbling scale to the natural wonders around them. Chienlung was taught to look at all the opposing elements until he grasped the perfect balance that Guo-ji had achieved. The payoff was to share the painter's vision of the world as a complete and harmonious whole. Chinese artists have other ways of getting through to viewers who glaze over at the first mention of harmony and wholeness. There's a secret message hidden in each detail, and every Chinese knows the code. The flow of water means the flow of life. Chinese orchids always equal moral refinement. The Chinese admire the bamboo plant because it bends without breaking. So every painting of bamboo symbolizes the ability to bounce back from adversity. The Emperor Chienlung was always happy when he could find a symbolic meaning in a painting. "When I find pleasure in orchids," he wrote, "I think of uprightness. When I see bamboo, I think of supple virtue." That is what is meant by the proverb, "The ancients got their ideas from things." Ultimately, the Chinese artist sees no boundaries between himself and his subject. A poet wrote this about a similar painting.
When Wen Dong painted bamboo, he saw bamboo only, not people. Did I say he never saw people? So rapt he forgot his own name. He himself became bamboo.
This painting in the National Palace Museum is called Old Trees by a Cold Waterfall. It mirrors the character of the artist, who was 79 years old when he painted it.
Here is a tree older than the forest itself. The years of its life defy reckoning. Its roots have seen the upheavals of hill and valley. The world laughs at its shoddy exterior and cares nothing for the fine grain of wood inside. Stripped free of flesh and hide, all that remains is the core of truth.
One man took this form of self-expression to the extreme. This is a portrait of Ni Zan. So is this. Ni Zan was an eccentric genius who lived 4 centuries before Chienlung. He had his servants scrub down the leaves in his garden so he could better appreciate their shape and color. In his art, Ni Zan stripped nature down to the barest essence. As in the greatest calligraphy, every single brushstroke is a portrait of the man, stubborn, uncompromising, unapproachable. There's a political undercurrent to his work. Ni Zan rebelled against the emperor of his day, an outsider from beyond the Great Wall. Ni Zan turned down an imperial appointment and went to live in exile on a houseboat. There he reached the height of self-expression. The very emptiness of his paintings signifies Ni Zan's protest against the imperial authority. These paintings became some of the most revered works of art in China. The Emperor Chienlung believed that by owning paintings like this, he could elevate himself to the level of a Ni Zan. As he wrote appreciative comments on the painting, Chienlung felt a close bond with this supreme artist. But no two men were ever farther apart. Ni Zan disdained the gaudy trappings of power. Chienlung loved them. As much as he tried to appreciate the high-minded painting, his personal taste leaned toward the showy, the theatrical. Like rulers before him, he commanded court painters to portray him in self-important roles. A great sage, a great warrior. He even went so far as to order his portrait painted as Buddha. But all these roles, even that of scholar-artist, were fantasies to Chienlung. The emperor's reality was the bustle and celebration of court life, and his collection shows just how much he loved the things that wealth and power brought him. Chienlung was born in a gilded cage many centuries in the making. Every moment of the emperor's day was prescribed, from his 4 a.m. wake-up call to the nightly rendezvous with his concubines. In a home like this, even household chores had to be done in style, with museum-quality utensils. As a patron of the arts, Chienlung imposed his taste everywhere. He dictated to the artisans of the Imperial workshops specific styles, designs, colors, materials, even the exact size of his own head in court portraits. During his reign, extraordinary quantities of objects were commissioned. It was an era of decoration by mass production. Chienlung collected old things the same way. If one thing was good, 100 were better, and 1,000 better still. The emperor's natural instinct was for the garish. This side of Chienlung's taste is well represented in the National Palace Museum collection, like this painted enamel vase with matching gold shoulder pads. Chienlung also had a weakness for the purely frivolous. He thought nothing of having a master carver spend years on this incredibly ornate ivory picnic basket, which probably never made it out of doors. Entire galleries of the National Palace Museum are devoted to adult toys, miniature boxes filled with tiny treasures made solely for the amusement of Chienlung and his courtiers. Nothing was safe from the emperor's passion for knickknacks. Anonymous craftsmen in the Imperial workshops turned out curios en masse. The wonder is that so many were so beautiful. And some were even useful. Many served as good luck charms. Their power often lay in a simple play on words. Bats were considered lucky because their name, Fu, sounds like the Chinese word for blessing. An upside-down bat was even luckier. The word for upside down sounds like the word for arrived. So, an upside-down bat, happiness has arrived. Symbols have power. The dragon was the exclusive symbol of the emperor. It stood for the strength that held China together. But Chienlung's vast art collection holds a power beyond that of the objects themselves. A jeweled crown is an obvious symbol, a token of sovereignty, no more, no less. But the pure lines of this sung bowl say something else. They speak to our sense of pride that human hands have made something so simple, so lasting. For the Chinese, this pride is deeply personal. It's their legacy, their immortality. For all its power, art is fragile. This collection has been through the worst and survived. The objects that Chienlung inherited and collected left the Forbidden City in 14,000 crates, one step ahead of the Japanese. They endured a 16-year chase across war-torn China. Nothing like this had ever been attempted before. Curators like Na Zhi-Liang improvised as they went along.
There were bombs and air raids all the time. Whenever there was an air raid, we'd just hide under the train in the space between the cars and the ground until it was over. Then we'd come out and start packing again. It was a very nerve-wracking period, very tense.
The art found temporary shelters scattered all over China. A schoolhouse, a Confucian temple, an abandoned warehouse.
Termites are unbelievable. They can eat a whole box in one day. Every day we had to use a flashlight to see if termites were crawling into the boxes. If we found even one, we would take the boxes down and fill them with insecticide. We had to do this twice a day, once in the morning and once in the afternoon. Oh, thank God it was a temporary situation. If it had been permanent, I would have gone crazy.
In all, the artworks traveled more than 5,000 miles. They were never far from the brink of destruction. One truck full of boxes overturned on a bridge and plunged to the river below.
The amazing thing is that the truck that fell was carrying books and documents. And if it had fallen into the water, everything would have been destroyed. But there had been a drought, so the truck fell into a dry riverbed. All the other trucks in the group were carrying porcelain objects, but the one that overturned had nothing but books in it. Unbreakable cargo. People say the antiques have guardian spirits. I don't know if there were really spirits, but we made it through.
At the end of the war, the collection was miraculously intact in the southern city of Nanking. But before it could be returned to the capital, a new war threatened. A battle for control of China between the communists and the nationalists. Mao Zedong or Chiang Kai-shek? Into whose control would Chienlung's treasures fall? The journey, begun 16 years earlier, was nearly over. Many important pieces were returned to Beijing. But in 1948, the cream of the Imperial collection, along with treasures from other important institutions, put to sea for the safe haven of Taiwan.
At first we built the simplest kinds of homes and bought all bamboo furniture because we thought we were making a short visit. We figured we'd just abandon the bamboo chairs and tables when we went back home. Now we're buying permanent furniture.
Taiwan has set itself up as a guardian of Chinese tradition. But it's one thing to hold on to the past, it's another thing to keep it alive. Mr. He Ah-gen works at preserving a tiny piece of China's heritage.
I have been interested in wood carving since I was young, and that's why I always stuck by my father and watched him at work.
The intricate molds that he carves are meant to decorate the surface of ink sticks used by painters and calligraphers.
After the conflict on the mainland, people came over here to Taiwan and wanted ink sticks. They wanted my father to carve the molds for them, but he was just too busy. I saw that he was overwhelmed with work. I already knew how to carve seals, so eventually I took over the job of carving ink stick molds. I'm 65 years old, so I've been doing this now for half a century.
For a long time, Mr. He was afraid he'd die without getting someone to carry on his craft. Recently, he managed to find one pupil.
Young people today want to learn about computers and modern technology. They have no interest in traditional handicrafts, nor the patience it takes. They would rather be out in the world doing business. It's a trend of modern times, and it's really a pity, because without young people, this kind of craftsmanship is going to disappear.
China has survived worse things than progress. The prime directive of Chinese civilization is, don't lose the past. But change doesn't have to mean loss. There's certainly no shortage of video games in Taiwan, but the tricks of traditional puppet theater still have the power to enchant. The problem is a universal one. How to reconcile tradition and innovation. How to take off into the future while keeping your feet on the ground.
We know that everyone has to have roots. If you have no roots, then you have no perspective, no point of departure. You are just floating. If you work in the arts and don't really understand your own culture, your results will never be more than skin deep.
Sun Chao is a ceramicist who lives by a philosophy with deep roots in China's culture. The Chinese artist makes a specialty of reconciling opposites.
The way a Western person sees objects is that the person and the object are two distinct and opposite entities. And the reason God created objects is so that man can use them. In Western eyes, man is most important, right after God. The Chinese see it differently. Heaven, nature, man, and all creation are all equal. Heaven and man are one.
The National Palace Museum collection reflects an extraordinary range of taste. For Chienlung, collecting art was an act of self-creation. He was Manchurian and Chinese. His overriding desire was to reconcile the two and go down in history as a great ruler of China. Today, Chienlung's collection is the focus of a fierce controversy. Both the Republic of China on Taiwan and the People's Republic of China on the mainland claim to be the true owners of these national treasures. Chienlung would have been the first to understand that the argument is really about power. In the eyes of the world, Chienlung's collection helped him accomplish his goal of becoming Chinese. The contending governments believe that whoever owns this art possesses the Chinese soul. But there's a spirit in the collection that goes beyond all controversy, a spirit of reconciliation. The art that Chienlung collected has come to represent China to an entire people and to the world.